The lengths Arab goes to get the right angle are impressive. But there have been more than cosmetic changes to Beijing over the last century. For instance, in our next segment, we'll take a side trip into one of Beijing's industrial districts and see how fresh thinking revitalized an old warehouse. On the outside, the 798 Times Place building looks like any other abandoned factory, as China's industry shifted its focus from heavy manufacturing to service and high-tech industries. And as reforms moved Beijing closer to a market economy, many factories sat around collecting dust. But innovative artists and electronics workers revived the 798 building into what it is today, one part private electronics company and one part trendy Beijing art gallery.
It's another busy day for Yong, who is preparing his gallery to host an international art exhibit. The left-hand, right-hand exhibit, featuring contemporary art from both China and Germany, will open in this old factory. Once Yong was a famous art photographer. Later, he tried his hand at business and became very successful after founding a few tourist ventures in Beijing. His penchant for promoting cultural industries soon manifested itself again in his interest in the old number 798 factory. In 2002, he rented the biggest workshop available in 798 and renamed it 798 Times Space.
This workshop embodies the history of New China, from the 1950s to the Cultural Revolution to the present. Massive changes have taken place in China's society and economy over the years. The factory's workshops have been standing idle. Now, we put them to use again, remodeling them with a concept that responds to today's trends. So really, this space concentrates the past, the present, and the future in a single location.
The old factory is charming in its own way. The high-ceiling, brightly lit workshops could have been lifted right out of Germany. Dilapidated machinery lurks everywhere. Faded posters and slogans from a bygone era still cling to the walls. Over the past 3 years, this site has taken in close to 100 contemporary artists who have established studios, design companies, cafes, and bars, all under this roof. Huang returned from Japan 2 years ago. He was one of the few people dining at 798 in its early years. Back then, Huang saw through the broken glass and rusty iron doors and noticed the airy Bauhaus architecture, rare even in its native Germany.
I thought the environment was great. Back then, I knew that even if there was just a doghouse available, I'd take it just so I could live here.
Today, his wife is back from Japan. The first time she saw her husband's choice of home in Beijing, she saw only a rundown factory with a 30-foot ceiling. Not surprisingly, she was completely shocked.
When I first saw it, there was nothing here. It was a factory. Huang said he wanted to make this place into a new kind of community. I said, how?
When I said that I wanted to rent this place, my friends, including one who lives around here now and a director of a Japanese art gallery, said no way. Like my wife, they were shocked at the condition of the factory. It was filled with machines and really filthy. We had to move all the equipment out and renovate. They thought it would cost a fortune. Truth be told, they liked the space, but they said they didn't have the money. I said, let me take care of the renovating. Just try renting some space.
The thundering sound of machinery that greets you as you walk out of 798 isn't an echo from the past. It's real.
What's interesting is that there's one factory ramping up production here. Big changes going on over there. That's neat. The workers have their own different headspaces. All this change is unexpected, so they're surprised and shocked. At the same time, they sigh with nostalgia for the days of the old industrial state. Of course, artists and visitors, both Chinese and foreign, are deeply touched by this kind of contrasting emotion.
3 years ago, state reorganization brought the number 798 factory and several surrounding military electronics firms together. The workforce was slashed from several thousand to just over 300. Workers who could buy shares formed 4 to 5 small companies around the old assembly lines. Following his mentor, Xu Peiyun, Wang Chongli established a new electronics company. Today, the business employs more than 20 people. They produce resistors for color TVs.
We decided to adapt to the changes in the industry.
Wang Chongli began working in the 798 factory in 1981 and stayed there for 20 years. When the consolidation took place, most employees found jobs elsewhere. Wang, on the other hand, fell into business ownership by following his boss.
This is my mentor. I've been following him every day since I started at this factory. Back then, the attitude was that if there was anyone willing to work on the assembly line, it should be kept open. Otherwise, it should be shut down. But if it were really closed, what would people do? Should we all just go home? My boss said, "Let's contract out." I agreed with him right away.
The workers often wander through the exhibition hall during their breaks. They always receive a warm welcome from the artists. Their presence reinforces the strong ties to China's industrial history, already inherent in 798 Times Space.
Today's a real honor for our 798 Times Space. There are so many contemporary artists here from Germany and China, plus their friends, plus their fans, all in this very German space built over 50 years ago. This workshop that's full of modern Chinese history. It really speaks to the high quality of this exhibition.
The China-Germany Contemporary Art Exhibition is the first direct artist-to-artist international contemporary art exchange in China. 32 Chinese artists, including Huang and 16 German artists, are taking part in this monumental event. Others find different meanings in 798 Times Space.
We worked in this shop all our lives. When I came here in 1963, it was called the largest factory in all of Asia, in the heart of the Chinese radio industry. All the factories were built by Germans. Employees devoted their entire youths and all their energy to this factory. Contemporary art has really come into its own since China began opening up to the outside world. Local artists interact with their colleagues around the globe, and they've been selling their artwork to an ever-growing market beyond China's borders. So the art community now has the capital to invest in itself. But 798 Times Space was also a child of the reforms. Since there was a real movement to close down most of the energy-gobbling, heavy-polluting industries around the city of Beijing, the factory was all but abandoned. It was just waiting for a new owner. We wouldn't have dreamed of this 2 or 3 years ago, much less 10 years ago.
The 798 complex is a community of the future. The fact that it's still in use is a happy testament to the very human ability of adapting to and even embracing change. Still, nobody knows how history will unfold and affect this old factory, or the smaller privately owned industrial workshops surrounding it.
You can't turn off your memories when you're a child. You need a sense of historical connection so that you can figure out what life means. I hope things at 798 will be as exciting in the future as they were in the past. It might not happen, but we can't turn back the clock.
We tend to think of the buildings built in those first years after 1949 as run down. And these are all those kinds of structures. But they're historical artifacts in their own right and part of our inheritance. If we can not only understand the aesthetics of that era's architecture, but translate it into something that works for us today, that just reinforces Beijingers' sense of continuity and permanence.
What's the best way to symbolize a modern Beijing? I think it shouldn't just be skyscrapers and freeways. It needs to express Beijing's changes of heart, too. 798 time space is a space that embodies the deep, soul-stirring changes that have taken place within the city since the 1980s.